sometimes what happens is when you, after you have prepared a will, you realize that there are certain mistakes that you made in a will. You decide that a property that you have given to somebody is not that somebody who you would want that property to go to. You also see that there are certain mistakes that you have actually committed in your will. Now, what are the options which are available to you? One option is that you can redo your entire will altogether, and you can re-execute it, revoke the earlier will, and say that now this is my last will and testament. But if you don't want to take that entire trouble of redoing your entire will, etc., if it's only one mistake or one property that you want to change the name of the beneficiaries, then there's a document which is called as a codicil. A codicil will explain, modify, or add to any will that you have created, and a codicil will replace the original clause in the will in the manner that you had earlier explained and substitute it with what you have provided in the codicil. A codicil is important for you to know is that a codicil doesn't have any independent existence. Since it either modifies, explains, or adds to something which is already contained in the will, it has no independent existence. The moment the will goes away, a codicil will go away. And a codicil is to be executed in the same way that you execute a will. That is, it needs to be executed by the testator or the person who's creating the will, and it has to be witnessed by two witnesses. The same way that you will execute a will is the way that you will execute a codicil. Another thing that we will come to a little later is on registration, but because we are dealing with codicil here, the one thing that you need to keep in mind is that although registration of a will is not compulsory, but if you have registered a will, then you need to ensure that a codicil which either modifies, explains, or adds to that will, that codicil will also require registration, because otherwise a registered will be contrary to an unregistered document, and a codicil will not be able to prevail in case your will is registered. So please keep that in mind. Now, is the, very frequently I get this question: what is the stamp duty that you need to pay on a will? Fortunately, there's no stamp duty that is attracted on a will at all or on a codicil. It can be made on any paper. You can make it on your customized paper. You can use any plain paper. If people have preference with respect to any colors of paper, you can have it in the color that you choose. As long as it is visible, it's enough for it to be called a will. Of course, if you want to register it, the registrar is not going to accept any color of paper. He will require it to be in a legal green, legal size paper if you want to register a will, because that's a requirement which the sub-registrar has. But as long as you are not wanting to register a will, and we'll come to registration a little later, it can be executed on any plain paper. There is no problem on the kind of paper that you executed. No stamp duty is payable. Now, how should a will be executed? Now, there is no specific form of execution. The only requirement which I have explained earlier is that the executor of the will, that is the person who's prepared the will, he needs to either sign it or put his mark on the will. Now, it's possible that sometimes people who are disabled or who are not able to, either sign or put their mark, they can direct somebody else to actually execute the will on their behalf. So it is possible that a person who's facing disability to say, this is my will, I'm not able to do it for the following reasons. I'm directing so and so person to affix his mark or affix his signature on my behalf. And because I'm directing him to do so, whatever mark or signature he puts onto that document, it will be considered as my will. Now, we don't normally, advise clients to do this, because we would like the person who's creating the will to sign the will himself so that the objections are not taken. We never know how family relations get strained after the death of a person. So in order to avoid complications, as far as the person whose will it is executing it by himself, that is good enough. He needs to execute it not in the presence of witnesses, but he needs to be personally present when each of the witnesses are executing or attesting the signature of the testator by saying that yes, we have witnessed this will. And it is important that the witnesses sign in the presence of the testator. The testator needs to confirm to the witness that this is my signature. He does not need to necessarily sign in the presence of the witnesses. The requirement of law is that the witnesses, however, both of them or each of them need to sign in the presence of the testator. We normally, see situations where, we sign the will and we then send it to somebody's house and say that, please be my witness and please sign that document. I'm confirming to you that this is my signature. Let me tell this to everybody that the law requires the witnesses to sign in the presence. We've seen many court cases where the court have struck down the will because you have not seen the person sign in your presence. When I say you, the deceased have not seen the witnesses sign. It is important sometimes because if you're excluding certain legal aids, certain family members, it is important that you should try and see if you can video record, what has really happened during the execution of the will. Let me tell you that, why I'm suggesting is because I've done so many cases, so many wills have been challenged in court, and with my experience, I have seen that what we try and recommend to the parties is please video record it for two reasons. One is you never know when you have to go back in memory to again say with absolute precision what happened really on that particular day. We don't want anybody to die, but a person after preparing a will may live for several years. And if the contest of the will has to happen with the delay that happens in our courts, for many years, you may not be, in a position to kind of remember exactly what has happened. And that is why when you record it, you somehow get a recollection of the actions that you had performed as a witness on that particular day. And then you may be in a position to recollect your memory in a better way than you would have otherwise. It's also important to record it so that you can, make an affidavit exactly in the manner that the recording shows, so that you can say with absolute precision where was the deceased sitting, what was his state of mind, what discussions you all had, what events preceded the execution of the signatures of the witnesses, what events happened after the witnesses signed, what time did this happen, where did it happen, and the manner it happened. So this would, kind of make it very simple for the purposes of your affidavits. And also in the event of a contest, the courts will look at that because you wouldn't, fabricate something with a deceased person, which has happened several years ago. So the recommendation is to record it if that is possible. Now, what are the various kinds of wills? There are two kinds of wills essentially. For normal people like you and me, we are called unprivileged people, and that's why we prepare something called as unprivileged wills. Now, if they are unprivileged wills, then they are wills which are also privileged wills. Now, who has the privilege of making these wills? Now, a privileged will is really speaking made by a soldier, an airman, or a mariner who is engaged in actual warfare. So these are the categories of people who can make something called as a privileged will. Now, what is a privileged will? A privileged will does not need to be in writing. A privileged will does not need any witnesses. A privileged will can be oral, and the rules which are applicable to unprivileged will are not applicable so far as privileged wills are concerned. These are not normally made by people, and since we are going to be more concentrating on unprivileged wills, A person who's a soldier, an airman, or a mariner, he does not strictly require to follow the procedure which the law provides for us. And he can do this in a manner because the government, the parliament realizes that when a person is at war, he is not going to be in a position to get witnesses. He's not going to be in a position that he can, have a piece of paper. If somebody is facing death while he's in warfare, the parliament allows him to make an oral will, and then of course that oral will need to be explained by the person to whom it was made, so that the necessary beneficiaries can get the benefit of that. So normal people who are not engaged in warfare like you and us, is we make an unprivileged will. Now, what are the various kinds of wills that can be made, which are called and which come within the subgroup of unprivileged wills? One of the types of wills that can be made is contingent will. Suppose you are traveling out of the country and you want your properties to go in the event of you traveling outside for a limited purpose. You can make a will which is specific to a contingency happening. So you can say that this will can be given effect to if something happens to me while I am traveling for this period of time. So you can make a will which is contingent to only that specific event which may or may not happen. If that event doesn't happen during that, that contingency doesn't happen. So say you've provided for a contingency that suppose you die while you're traveling to Europe, and in the year so and so when you are going on a holiday, if that contingency doesn't happen, then this will is not given effect to. So this will comes into effect only in the event of that contingency actually occurring. Now, there's another thing which people can prepare, and this is normally done by spouses, where they prepare a common document with respect to their joint properties as well as their separate properties. Now, this is contained in one document. It's called a joint will. So it is prepared normally by spouses who say that we jointly own these properties and we separately own the following properties. And it is normally given to the other spouse. So when you have wills, when you want to prepare a will with a spouse, which is either disposing of common properties or self-acquired properties, and you want to give it to the other spouse member, you can prepare one document, and that document is called as a joint will. Excuse me. The other category of wills are called as mutual wills. Now, what is a mutual will? A mutual will are two wills which are prepared by two individuals where they agree as to how the disposition of their respective properties are to take effect after their deaths. Now, mutual wills are normally prepared when either spouse or both spouses have remarried and they have children from earlier marriages. Now, in such situations, because you want both spouses' children to be protected, you prepare a document which is called a mutual will. So the husband prepares a will, the wife prepares the will, the husband provides in case something happens to him with respect to his properties, where he probably gives a bequest to the children of his earlier marriage, and the wife also accordingly does this. Now, the importance of a mutual will is that when you prepare this will, where it forms an agreement between the two spouses to protect the children of their earlier marriages, and without the consent of the other spouse, this will cannot be cancelled or cannot be revoked. So an exception that a will can be cancelled, revoked at any time, the exception to that is a mutual will, where a mutual will can be cancelled only with the consent of the spouse. Otherwise, it cannot be cancelled. It becomes irrevocable. And when one spouse passes away, you can't change your will at all because you had an agreement with your deceased spouse, the manner in which the properties were to get distributed. So the moment the one spouse passes away, the second spouse cannot change his will or her will because of the agreement that was entered into with your deceased spouse. There is also something called as a duplicate will. Now, a duplicate will is nothing but two sets of the same will. Normally, what people do is they try to execute the will to keep the original with themselves. They would also want some trusted person to also keep one set of the will in case something happens and they are not in a position to find the will which you've kept with yourself. Now, when you prepare a duplicate will, you will execute it in the same manner that you had executed a will, but you will have two copies of it. So one copy will remain with you, one copy will remain with your trusted person, whether it is your banker, whether it is a executor, whether it is a beneficiary. Now, the only thing that you need to keep in mind when you're keeping duplicate wills is the law assumes that if you cannot find the copy or the original will which the testator had kept with himself, then the law assumes that the testator had revoked that will because nobody can find it. So although duplicate wills is something that is suggested, my recommendation is not to have too many original wills in the form of duplicate will, because if you're not able to get the original which the testator or the deceased had kept behind, it will be very difficult for you to prove that that continued to remain the last will of the deceased. And the law has an assumption against you which says that because you can't find the will kept behind by the deceased, it is assumed that he had revoked that will. So the suggestion is that although you can create a duplicate will, we would not recommend that you do so for this reason. A holograph will is a will which is handwritten by the person in his own hand, where he sets out the manner that his properties have to get distributed. Now, a holograph will has its own advantages. The advantage is that if a person is writing a will in his own handwriting, the doubt which can be raised by anybody is immediately struck down, because you are able to confirm that if a person has handwritten his will, he had complete knowledge of what he was doing. He was in his complete senses because he has prepared a will. And the way he's drafted the will, he's considered everything that he wanted distributed. So a holograph will sometimes has its advantages because you can to that extent give a complete knockdown on any objection that a person is not able to understand what he is prepared. And a holograph is normally prepared when a person does not know English and wants to use another language for the purposes of his comfort to decide how his properties need to be bequeathed. Concurrent wills. Now, concurrent wills is again interesting, and I had a couple of questions with respect to situations which I will try and cover in concurrent wills. You can have wills with respect to different properties. You can have separate wills relating to your properties in different countries. Now, in India, and if you're a Hindu or a Christian, or sorry, not a Christian, but a Parsi, the law in India is that if a Hindu or a Parsi leaves a will behind, either disposing of property in Calcutta, Madras, or Mumbai, or prepared in any other place, but relates to property in Calcutta, Madras, or Mumbai, a probate is necessary if that will is to be considered as valid. Now, when a person has properties in different jurisdictions, when I say jurisdictions, I mean countries. Suppose an NRI who's originally from India but has now shifted, migrated. Just to give an example, say somebody like Asmita, who's now today living in New York, but she has immobile property or she has properties in Mumbai. I would recommend that she would prepare separate wills for her properties in jurisdictions, because the law applicable in respect of your properties will be different. your requirements of probate will be different. And what happens is when you actually apply for a probate, the original will gets taken away by the court which issues the probate, and what you get is the original probate with a copy of the will. Now, if you have included all your global properties in one document, it will become very difficult for you if the original is, say, required in a different country to be produced. Because when you applied for probate in Mumbai, the High Court is going to take away the original will and will not release it because there's no, I mean, the courts, the only thing that you get back is a probate which shows that the will is valid and will confirm a copy and will annex a copy of that will to you. Now, if you have only one will and the law in a different country requires you to again submit an original for any succession, whether it's probate, whether it's administration, you won't be able to produce the original. And likewise, if you have already done that for your global assets, so say if Asmita has left a will behind, and if her requirement of, in New York is to submit the original there, and if she has a property in Mumbai and she cannot submit the original, then it's going to be very painful to convince the court over here that a copy of the will is being produced because the original has been submitted to another court of a different jurisdiction. So I would always recommend that you have separate wills for separate properties when they are in different jurisdictions. If you have properties only in India, it can all be combined into one will. You don't need to have separate wills for mobile properties or immobile properties. But concurrent wills should be normally prepared when you have properties in different countries, and you should prepare a will with respect to properties that you're leaving behind in a particular country so that that law becomes applicable with respect to that particular.